gather your party before venturing forth.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Dungeon Pub. I am once again your very humble bartender, and as promised, today we're gonna talk about the Ranger. Yes, this is a class review, we're doing a late hour show. The Ranger. Yes, what is it about this thing that makes, well, me so weary? Well, let's find out. No more delays, let's jump right into it. You've already probably seen the previous two. If you haven't, click on the annotations. We've done Barbarian, we've done Fighter. So Ranger. What is it about the Ranger? Well, let's get something right off the bat. The Ranger, as per the player's handbook, wasn't exactly the most exciting thing that Wizards of the Coast have ever done. As a matter of fact, it was a little underwhelming. And that was a bit of a problem, especially for people like me. I've been around for some time, and I've seen the iterations of the Ranger. Also, there happens to be that one character that I really adore, and I grew up with the books of. If you don't know who I'm talking about, come on, you know who I'm talking about. He's drow and has a kitten and... Right. In any case, the point being that the Ranger's been around for a long time. It's been around since the very first edition of the game, even before that. And it's been up to things, right? And the main concept behind the Ranger was actually taken from Aragorn. Again, if you don't know who I'm talking about, what are you doing? Go watch the movies. But that was the point. Yeah, this fighter guy, this warrior, this hunter, who's living on the edges of civilization, and he's hunting enemies of the civilized people of the world. Amazing, right? Yeah, it's actually kind of cool. What's the problem, you may ask? Well, the problem is that when 5th edition came out, the Ranger was a little underwhelming. The abilities weren't where they needed to be, and a lot of the stuff that the Ranger could do wasn't all that impressive. Now, immediately some of you may jump up and say, but wait, you've said that doesn't matter, and you're supposed to build your... Well, yeah, in a way, yes, and true, and I apologize if I'm going back on my word, but sometimes it's just too blatant, it's just too obvious, which is why, again, just to kind of get this particular piece of the puzzle out of the way, the class was redone. It was redone some months after the original Player's Handbook was released. It wasn't kind of better. As a matter of fact, it was really well done the second time they threw it out, and it was done via the Unearthed Arcanas, which we haven't spoken about yet. We're still early in the project. We're gonna get to those. And actually, as a matter of fact, the Ranger is a really cool reason for us to do that. So, okay, no more delays, no more beating around the bush. Let's get right into it. Conceptually, what is a Ranger? Well, if you go to the Player's Handbook, I have one open right in front of me, and you read some of the fluff, you're gonna get the main points. They're hunters, they're independent adventurers, they like to skirt the outlands and, you know, roam the forests and be all, you know, guerrilla fighting and bush mastery. That's, in its own right, actually kind of cool. I mean, consider the previous two classes that we spoke about. Barbarians kind of get into that, but the whole civilized creature versus uncivilized creature is actually very strongly pointed out there. The Ranger doesn't really go that route. Rangers are defenders of civilization. They're not on the cusp of things. And in terms of being a fighter, Rangers are actually very competent. As a matter of fact, they're very to the point, if you know what I mean, about many things, but they're not fighters. The Ranger is not a platform. It is not intended for you to be capable of making all these thousands of builds and even making a pacifist. No. Much like the Barbarian, the Ranger has a lot of abilities geared towards making it a particular way. Again, counterpoint to the Fighter, which has many options that you are going to have to take. The Ranger gives you certain choices, but they're all in particular areas and categories. And when we get to the actual subclasses, and you will see that the choices are geared towards a specific idea. So where does the Ranger fall into that? Kind of in between, right? The Ranger is not your typical, well, wildling, if you want to look at it from that perspective. Rangers are trained warriors. They're fighters with actual skill. They're not barbarians who smash and throw and growl and get all the girls and are amazing. They're not fighters, right? They are their own thing. And that particular thing is built around this idea of being away from the comfort of your home, away from the battlefield or the, even if you want to look at it that way, the dungeon. They are very far away from civilization, the cities, the towns, the villages. They are out there where there's no comfort, no light, no easy way to get food even. And that is what, in my opinion, makes them amazing. From a very different point of view, if you want to even go in that way, when you consider the army or a army nowadays, a modern thing, there is actually a unit, a position within the army called the Army Rangers. And what those guys are they are elite troops, actually trained for that kind of stuff. They're elite infantry. So the Ranger kind of goes into that direction a little bit as well, with the hunting and the being on their own and not depending or on anybody to have their back. What is even cooler, however, is that the Ranger kind of incorporates that environment into themselves via understanding the land, understanding a particular group of enemy, particular type of enemy. We're going to get into that in a moment. And, of course, what are you going to find in the wilderness? Well, wild animals, other than orcs and goblins and whatever your DM is going to throw at you. So, Rangers actually have that additional side to them. As I said, I mean, if you don't know about Driz, then what are you even doing here? I'm sorry if I'm coming off a little rough, but come on. So, again, that being said, Rangers get to have pets. I mean, some of them, a particular kind of them. So, conceptually, that is what a Ranger is. And some people are a little confused by that notion. They say, well, why can't I just make a fighter that's from somewhere else? Because, dear sir or madam, Rangers are actually better at this particular kind of fighting than anybody else. Another point that I want to make is that unlike fighters and paladins, which we're probably gonna do next, unlike barbarians, Rangers are not intended to be defensive. Even though they're defenders of humanity, their point and task is to go out there and kill the bad things, to kill the monsters that normal people sometimes don't even get to see. And in order to do that, they have to deal a lot of damage. So Rangers are, if you want to put D&D characters into MMO perspectives, they're DPS. They do a lot of damage. One of a few ways, sometimes with help, sometimes without, but Rangers are geared towards destroying whatever is on the other side so that, you know, people back home don't have to stare at the big ugly orcs or whatever your campaign is about. So far, so good, right? You're looking at this, you're thinking, wow, okay, that can be kind of cool. Yeah, indeed. Rangers can be amazing, and there are so many RP opportunities and backstory opportunities. And let's get a few things out of the way. I mean, there's been this game lately. I enjoyed it for a little bit, didn't particularly enjoy the second part. It's called Shadow of Mordor. And the main character in that game essentially fits into that description, 100%. He's intended to be this very Aragorn character, but not in the sense of the great destiny of the king, more so of he's a person who's specialized in fighting orcs, and he understands them, he understands what they do, he even understands their language, and even before he becomes, no spoilers, but he becomes a little enchanted in certain ways, that was his purpose from the beginning of the game. Then certain things happen, he gets to be all personal about it, and from that point on, consider the gameplay. If you know what I'm talking about, if you've played the game, then you will quickly begin to see many standpoints between what we're going to talk about and what that game represents in terms of favorite enemy, favorite terrain, not necessarily sticking it out and toughing it out, but attacking from ambush and trying to make your enemies less effective. Another point that I've made before, and we've had in our adventures, because we're particular fans of certain FromSoft games, and considering Bloodborne, right? The main idea of the Blood Hunter is actually a ranger, a person who's geared towards hunting a specific kind of enemy, 3 to be precise, in the game, and all the knowledge and all the necessary tools are there. So track them, kill them, hunt them, that's what you do. Point being that you can take the entirety of the fantasy spectrum, even go as far as Cthulhu-esque themes, and still make the ranger fit. So what next? Well, let's start going down by the numbers. The first thing that you're gonna see is hit points, hit dice, 1d10. Kind of like the fighter, like the paladin that we're gonna talk about, not like the barbarian, because barbarians have d12, but you are a martial class. Right now, your point is to be in combat, and going down the list further, sharing this HP with the fighter, that means that your job is going to be very similar in a standard D&D party. Your job is going to be that guy who's going to be in the face of things, or, as we're going to talk about in a moment, kind of be very, very far away if you're going for the ranged build. So what else? Proficiencies, light armor, medium armor, shields. The only thing you're not getting in terms of what the fighter got was the heavy plates, the heavy armor. There is an idea behind this. We're going to get to that in literally a moment. That's not actually a negative. That's a positive, and you're about to see why. Weapons, simple weapons, martial weapons, means the entirety of the thing. Tools, none. Again, kind of like the fighter, we don't get to play with the things. Saving throws, strength, and dexterity. Bing bong, hold on a minute, why? Well, I mean, consider the fighter, consider the barbarian. Strength and constitution in both instances. But suddenly, suddenly we have this thing where it says strength and dex. So immediately this new idea begins to pop in the mind. Rangers are not strength oriented. You can make the strength oriented build, you can make the thrower, you can give it some more armor, but in general, Rangers are intended to go off of dexterity. And we're gonna go into that a whole lot more before this video and the next two regarding the Ranger are done. But dexterity is going to be probably going to be your main attacking stat. And as I've probably said before in one of the previous videos, dexterity is probably the most helpful statistic that a person can up, the most helpful ability you can have, because it gives you so many things. Initiative, a lot of skills that are going to be very cringy. It gives you armor class, and overall ranged weapons, finesse, throwing, all that kind of good stuff. So, well, not throwing, but light and finesse. So, dexterity. We're introducing this new concept now, and as we go into the Ranger more, you're gonna see how this comes to play. Next up, skills. Choose 3. Another change. Wait a minute. Fighters got 2, barbarians got 2. Why 3? Because another interesting idea and something that's always been part of the Ranger as an archetype was that Rangers are supposed to have multiple lanes of utility. You're doing more things than just sticking it out in the middle of combat, shoving and throwing big things, smashing the enemy in the face and taking the hits or avoiding them with your idiotic AC. No. You're supposed to do some more things now. Given the fact that you're good at survival, good at tracking, good at knowing what things are where, perception, you get one additional skill for you to play with. That's kind of cool. You're not a rogue, you're not a bard, but you get to have all the benefits of a fighting class and one more skill. Moving down the line, equipment, scale mail or leaded armor. Yeah, I mean, this is standard stuff. 2 short swords or 2 simple melee weapons, Dungeoneer's pack or an Explorer's pack, longbow, and a quiver. You would notice that the longbow and the quiver are actually not a choice. They are right there and you're supposed to take them because, again, Rangers are intended to have multiple options pretty much at all times. If you're not in combat, you can do more things. If you are in combat, now you have this interesting capacity to not necessarily be stuck with what you're doing. If you have a shield and a sword, then you're going to use the shield and a sword. But here, the Ranger is already trying to tell you something else. Because you're using dexterity, you have a ranged option off the bat. And if you look up above, 2 short swords, simple melee weapons, you can actually take 2 weapons that have finesse, or rather, you already have the choice to do so, or you can take 2 others from the simple melee weapon list, and now you have the options to either go in melee or in ranged. Immediately I can hear some people go, oh, but bartender do that simple stuff. Yes, it is. It's very simple. Kind of like the entirety of D&D, it's not intended to be convoluted and you know, a head scratcher, but it's actually very communicating because immediately it tells you what this person is going to do. If this is your thing and you already have these ideas in your mind, then I can assure you the Ranger is going to be very, very, very fun. With that one little tiny annotation at the beginning that we're going to talk about some things in the following videos that we haven't done before. The Ranger in the book is usually not what we go by anymore. I just want to, again, stress that. So we're going to go through the abilities anyway, just because I want to make a comparison. I want to show you how things were changed in the later videos, part 2, part 3. I want to show you exactly what they tweaked so that you can perhaps get a better understanding of the mechanics of the game. So, anyway, throwing that again out the window, let's dig into what a Ranger can do. Level 1, favorite enemy. We're going back to what we said before about Aragorn and Drizzt and that whole thing with the video game stuff. You're supposed to have a particular target, right? This ability tells you that you're supposed to choose a type of an enemy. And it lists some of the, well, most of the of the enemy types that you're going to encounter. So apparitions, beasts, celestials, constructs, dragons, elementals, fae, fiend, giant, monstrosity, ooze, plants, or undead. That's a lot of stuff. And you're going to see, whoa, there's even celestials in there. Hell yeah, celestials come from another dimension. They're not natural, right? Unless, of course, you're a particular kind of believer. So yeah, this is what this does. And what it gives you is advantage on wisdom survival checks to track them. Again, kind of simple. Intelligence checks to recall information about them. So if you're rolling medicine, or rather, I'm sorry, not medicine, but nature, you're going to be able to do it better. What else? Well, learn one language that a particular creature type may know. So if you're picking Celestials, then obviously you know Celestial now. That's kind of cool. If you're picking Giant, then Giant. If you're picking Fiends, you're going to have to be a bit more specific, because Fiends have a few in subcategories like Infernals, Abyssal, and those other ones, the Yugoloth, I believe, which I don't believe have a specific language. Correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not 100% certain. And then what else? Well, you choose one additional favorite enemy as well as an associated language at 6th level and 14th level. So progressively throughout the class, you're going to pick more of these. And when I first saw this in the book, I kind of cringed a little, because forever since the very first edition of D&D, I believe this also gave you bonuses to attacks, bonuses to damage. Not anymore. It became very fluffy in this edition, but the concept has not changed. Your point is to have these creatures that you specifically don't like. And because you don't like them specifically, probably for a reason, by the way, look at your personality traits, bonds, stuff like that, you're gonna hunt them and, well, let's not say a big word, but deal a lot of damage to them, let's say that. Moving along, particularly familiar with one type of natural environment, you're adept with traveling and surviving in such regions, stuff like that, it's Natural Explorer. Again, at level 1, you get this particular thing. It kind of goes into the first ability, your favorite enemy. This gives you a favorite terrain. Back in the day, that's the way it was called. Here, it's a little different, right? Again, it's not necessarily the way it used to be back in the day, but that's not bad, right? That could be also good. So what does this do? Well, choose one type of favorite terrain. Arctic, coast, desert, forest, grassland, mountain, swamp, Underdark. If your adventure has some specifics, like different kinds of terrain that are unnatural maybe, or prevalent in some areas, talk this out with your DM. If you're playing an Arctic campaign, then obviously taking forest might not necessarily be the best idea. Again, though, if there are other unnatural things, like for example, in many of my adventures, there's a lot of lands that are, well, let's say augmented or messed up. That also can be summed up as a type of terrain. Talk with your DM, and at the end of the day, what does this give you? Well, difficult terrain doesn't slow your group's travel. Kind of cool. Could not mean anything, could mean pretty much everything, depending on the circumstances. Your group can become lost except by magical means, so unless you're recounting that particular scene from the Hobbit movies, then you're not gonna get lost. Even when you're engaged in another activity while traveling, such as foraging, navigating, or tracking, you remain alert to danger. That's kind of cool. If your DM is that kind of person that likes to run the really old school dungeony stuff, then this is going to be very powerful, and it's going to save your life probably. If you're traveling alone, you can move stealthily at a normal pace. Again, kind of goes back to that previous one, where terrain just doesn't slow you down. You're actually kind of fast. When you forage, you find twice as much food as you normally would, so without the necessity for magic, you could just roll survival and try to find food, which again could be very useful. And while tracking other creatures, you also learn their exact numbers, their size, and how long ago they passed through the area. Once again, you choose additional favorite terrain types at 6th level and 10th level, and all of this is very, very fluffy. It's very paddy, right? It pads your character very well. It gives the impression of who you are immediately. Like, nobody's gonna mistake you for whatever you're not, unless that's the intended point. But again, that's not the way it used to be. So, moving that away, I know this is going to get a little bit annoying later on. I'm going to stop doing it, I promise. But this is all more on the fluff side of things. And unless you're really, really running by the rules, and I mean cringingly so, a lot of stuff listed in this list is not going to be all that important. So, 2 very fluffy choices at level 1, not bad. But this is where it begins to trail a little, because considering what you got at level 1 for Barbarian, that was Rage, by the way, for those that don't remember, and for Fighter, which was essentially the passive and another ability, this is not okay. This is not enough. In any case, though, let's continue on. Let's see what else you get. Fighting style at level 2. So a level later, you get to choose a fighting style, kind of like the Fighter, but immediately you're gonna notice that the list is a little bit shorter. Some things are missing. No protector, no great weapon fighting, no... I think I'm missing one more, but I can't. Oh, yeah. No, I don't actually see which one I'm missing. But the point being that you have 4. You have 4 choices. Archery, defense, dueling, and 2 weapon fighting. Immediately, that point that I pointed to before, you're being driven towards a specific kind of selection here. What are you going to be better at from the things that the ranger is already geared towards? Yes, you can still have your short swords, which are finesse, which means you can use them with dexterity, But do you really want to be the 2-weapon fighter, or do you want to be the archer? Because you also get the longbow. Perhaps you want to make a different build. You want to make a build with more armor. So again, while you're wearing armor, +1 bonus from defense. Or perhaps you just want to use one hand. Again, like if we go back to that game that we spoke about previously, the Shadow of Mordor, the guy there just uses a longsword. He's just whacking the guys with the longsword. He doesn't have 2 weapons. And he doesn't even have a bow unless you count that particular spoiler that I want to make. But the point being, you are driven. You are not a platform. You're not like the fighter, okay? You're more like the barbarian, but where the barbarian is this very, 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 very specific kind of a creature, this is slightly wider. And if you don't know why so far, then let's get to the other ability that you get to the second level. If you haven't gotten the point already, you can use all the weapons, kind of like the fighter, but you're geared towards a specific choice. You have additional options outside of combat, and they're very fluffy, but they're not on par. So what do you get at level 2? Well, spellcasting. Dum. We haven't spoken about spellcasting so far. We kind of briefly mentioned it when we spoke about the Eldritch Knight, but the Ranger is actually a natural spellcaster. I mean that in more senses than you know. You get a number of spell slots. You get to have spells known first level and higher, and of course, moving down, spellcasting abilities. Everything is here for you. It's actually very simplified. And when you go back to the Ranger table, you're going to see that the entirety of the right side is actually devoted to how many spell slots you have, how many spells you know. Notice, no cantrips. Notice you don't get to have a arcane focus. You're not a druid. You get to, however, dabble into that particular kind of nature magic. So you can immediately see now that I said that where the Ranger exactly falls in terms of a class. He's not a fighter, fights like a fighter, but not a fighter. He's not a barbarian, has the abilities somewhat, but not a barbarian. He's not a druid. He's not specifically intended to just cast spells, but he can. Rangers are a mashup. They are this very intriguing mashup surrounding a particular concept of the Ranger character. And this is amazing. This is actually kind of cool. The Paladin kind of goes into that, but Paladins are more simple in that regard. Rangers get to have a very intriguing mashup of abilities, spells, gear choice, action options. And when you remove that from the game, actual backstory and character creation from the perspective of personality and bonds and flaws, you can also have a pet, an actual creature right there next to you that rolls its separate initiative and fights with different statistics. So you can see how the Ranger suddenly explodes into this gargantuan concept that is not necessarily anything that we've seen so far. We probably won't as well see another thing like this. I mean, bards kind of come closer, but they're more casters than anything else. As I said, Eldritch Knights, arcane rogues, still, the Ranger is outstandingly conceptualized. A little problem I have is the way they did it. So, moving right along. Archetype. At level 3, you get to pick an archetype. Currently, there are 2 in the book, but since we're going to talk about the Unearthly Arcanas sooner rather than later, there are more in the Unearthly Arcanas. There are a few more, and they're also very amazing, so we'll get through those as well. Again, at level 3, you get another ability. It's called Primeval Awareness. You can use your action and expend 1 Ranger spell slot. So your abilities also use spell slots. Never seen before. To focus your awareness on the region around you. For 1 minute per level of the spell slot you expend, you can sense whether the following types of creatures are present within 1 mile of you, or within up to 6 miles if you are in your favorite terrain. So you can use this at any point, but if you're in your favorite terrain, kind of better. And again, it kind of lists apparitions, celestials, dragons, elementals, fae, fiends, and undead. You would notice that these are creatures that have a particular kind of magical feel to them. I mean, apparitions, kind of horror-y. Celestials come from the upper planes. Dragons, kind of magical, can't run around it. Elementals, fae, fiends, you get the point. There are no beasts here, so you're literally trying to find anything weird in the weave itself. Another interesting point about this ability is if you use a higher level spell slot, you can do this for additional minutes, but usually combine with your previous ability, and if any of these are your favorite enemy, previous ability, I mean Natural Explorer and favorite enemy, you can actually get all the information you want. So far so good. I mean, other than spellcasting, which can have offensive things, so far nothing in this, well, I mean, okay, in the fighting style, nothing about this gives you the impression that this character is going to deal a lot of damage. And that is because the beginning of the character, the beginning of the class itself, the Ranger, is geared more towards getting your mentality to get to where Rangers are. So they're trackers. Before they are combatants, they are trackers. They are survivors. They're hunters. Remember? So You find your enemy first, then you apply multiple stabbings or firing ridiculous amounts of arrows. So, moving right along, ability score improvements, 1 at 4th level, 8th, 12th, 16th, and 19th. So the standard array of 5, kind of like the Barbarian, and they are essentially kind of like in every other class. So 2 to 1 ability, or 1 to 2 abilities, or if your DM is amazing, feats. Level 5, extra attack. Just 1, not like the fighter who can go up to 4, just the 1, but you're going to say, wait, like, aren't you... Well, remember, the Barbarian also got a total of 2, and this is the prevalent formula, apparently, because bards can also have 2, and other classes can go up to 2. Fighters are a bit unique in that regard, but combined with your bonus actions and the spells that you can cast with them, and also coupled with all of your choices of gear, for example, if you're dual wielding, then you can always attack with your bonus action, make 1 more attack. So the Ranger again straddles that gap. It's right there in the middle, exactly where it's supposed to be. Moving along. Lance Strike, starting at 8th level, so we're skipping a few, that's because this is where you're going to find most of your subclass abilities, but Lance Strike, starting at 8th level, moving through non-magical difficult terrain, costs you no extra movement. You can also pass through non-magical plants without being slowed by them and without taking damage from them, if they have horns, spines, or similar hazards. In addition, you have advantage on saving throws against plants that are magically created or manipulated to impede movement, such those created by the Entangle spell. Okay, this is cool, and it's fluffy, and you also get some of these stuff before, and if you're dealing with magical plants, I suppose... I don't mean to sound too disappointed, I'm overplaying this a little, but this is not enough, and initially when the game came out, when the Player's Handbook came out, that was most people's reaction. It was overwhelming, to the point where they literally wanted to redo it themselves. This is not enough. It's cool, and it's fluffy, but at this point, not enough. So, moving along, 10th level, hide in plain sight. Starting at 10th level, you can spend 1 minute creating camouflage for yourself. You must have access to fresh mud, dirt, plants, soot. You kind of get the point. Once you're camouflaged in this way, you can try to hide by pressing yourself up against a solid surface, such as a tree or a wall. This is at least as tall and wide as you are. You gain plus 10 bonus to dexterity stealth checks as long as you remain there without moving or taking actions. So that's seen from Rambo, essentially. You can muck up, you can put paint on your face, and you have to stand still. Once you move or take an action or a reaction, you must camouflage yourself again to gain this benefit. It's really cool. It's hella cool, but people can come up with this without this being an ability, right? That's kind of the point. If you're a ranger and you're already in the mentality of being a ranger and you've seen at least one military movie in your life, you're gonna know that camouflage is a thing. And if you've seen Rambo again, then you're gonna know that scene and you're gonna be like, oh yeah, I want to do that. This guy, I'm gonna let him pass and then I'm gonna get behind him. Cool, but this is an entire ability at level 10. So gearing you towards being a ranger, but kind of going a little overboard. Level 14, Vanish. Starting at 14th level, you can use the hide action as a bonus action on your turn. Also, you can be tracked by no magical means unless you choose to leave a trail. Okay, again, kind of suave, kind of rangery. Yes, rangers are supposed to be capable of doing stuff like this. I agree. But there's a spell that you get that literally does the second part of this thing. It's called Pass Without Trace, and it literally means that nobody can track you. And as for the first bit, rogues get this at level 2. They get it at level 2, so you're not necessarily gaining a lot of stuff. It's okay. It's cool. It is, and it's really enjoyable if it was at a really earlier level. So moving along, Feral Senses at 18th level, you gain preternatural senses that help you fight creatures you can't see. When you attack a creature you can't see, your inability to see it doesn't impose disadvantage on your attack rolls against it. You're also aware of the location of any invisible creature within 30 feet of you, provided that the creature isn't hidden from you and you aren't blinded or deafened. So you can sense things. Again, kind of, it's cool when you read it like that. It's actually kind of interesting. But rogues get pretty much the same thing. They get blind fighting, and other than that, it's there. I guess you run into invisible creatures or creatures that can magically vanish, and you're gonna be all right. But what about the other stuff? What about everything else that a ranger is supposed to do? Well, this is what we got. And at level 20, Foe Slayer. This is the capstone of the class. This is gonna be the ability that defines what you do, right? This is gonna be the ability that defines your class. So before I read it, remember the Barbarian and how the Barbarian at level 20 got +4 to their strength and +4 to their constitution, and that was also increasing their cap to the stat, so essentially turning them into large creatures without being large. Remember how the fighter got that 4th attack, right? Four attacks! Well, what does Foe Slayer give you? Well, at 20th level, you become an unparalleled hunter of your enemies. Once on each of your turns, you can add your wisdom modifier to the attack roll or the damage roll of an attack you make against one of your favorite enemies. You can choose to use this feature before or after the roll, but before any effects of the roll are applied. So, yeah, it's the fighters get this at level 3 of their Battle Masters. And at level 20, if you've ever gotten to level 20, if you haven't gotten magical gear and other bonuses from your adventure that essentially make this laughable, then this is disappointing. It really was, and it was when it came out. Me and my buddy, who's probably going to be editing this, and we saw this and we're like, okay, no, this is not okay. But this is what we got. This is what we had to deal with, and this is where I'm gonna cut this. This has been part 1. I'm planning on making 2 more, kind of like the Fighter and the Barbarian, where we talk about feats and builds and the actual archetypes. But I love Rangers. I do. I really, really do. And I know this video doesn't necessarily show my appreciation for them, but I do. I love the concepts. I love the characters that have been Rangers throughout the years, especially that guy who's Drow and has a kitten. But because of this, I actually intended to make the 4th video, actually, and talk about the errata and the unearthed arcana and the actual additional stuff, the actual remaking of the class, make a few comparisons so that we actually do the Ranger justice. So with this, thank you for sticking with us so far. If you've gotten to the end of this video, you're amazing. Stand tuned for part 2. If you like this, feel free to click like, feel free to subscribe, feel free to click dislike if you don't like it. That's also okay. Feel free to contact us. There's links down below. Just leave a comment, and I'll see you next time.